Howdy, everyone. Welcome to TYT's coverage of the RNC. If you've been watching all week, you've probably noticed that we've had a rotating panel of hosts. And today is your lucky day because you have two ladies who will probably be dunking on speakers at the RNC all night. Myself and our lovely, wonderful, brilliant Emma Vigeland. Emma,
that was me dunking. That was me dunking because there's no basketball tonight. So you're going to get your dunking here on tyt.com/live.
So I've been, Christian filled me in. Christian, my partner, who's very much into the sports world, whereas I'm not really. But he told me about various sports teams that have been canceling their games in protest of police brutality.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I mean, the NBA led the charge, specifically the Bucks. One of the best teams in the league, and the NBA is just like light years ahead of the rest of the leagues in terms of social justice and awareness and players' rights. But then baseball started canceling some games. Of course, the NHL, very white, is still playing, but I have some running bets that I want to cash in on anyway, so I'm kind of glad about it.
Jeez. I'm actually a little tiny bit surprised about baseball teams canceling their games, but that's great. I'm really happy about that.
Yeah, it's like a player strike, or they call it a wildcat walkout. So I mean, it's just I love seeing that because they should have advertised, if you want football to happen in the fall, wear a mask. That's always what it should have been, because then these people in the middle of Kentucky or whatever who didn't take it seriously would have worn a mask, and that the advertising would have been effective. People freak out when sports get taken away, so.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about the RNC thus far and what we're expecting tonight. We do have the list of speakers, and I have to be completely honest, I opted out of consuming even a second of RNC last night. I did watch the very first night, but just portions of it, TYT's coverage, of course. I have to say, J.R. Jackson's commentary on the first night was top notch. I really, really liked TYT's coverage on the first night. I don't have commentary on the second night because I didn't watch it, but yeah, Emma, I wanted to get your take.
Yeah, I mean, well, obviously John did terribly last night. Doesn't need to be, nothing more needs to be said. But I actually, we've talked about this. There needs to be some sort of mental health barrier when you cover the news all the time. And so I did watch the first night, and I chose not to watch last night and do other things instead. And I watched some of the coverage, of the speeches as well. I watched Eric Trump's specifically, just out of sheer curiosity about that fail boy. And I watched excerpts of Melania's speech, where I largely just feel sad for her, to be honest with you.
Well, let's take a look at what's going on at the RNC right now and see if we feel sad for this gentleman. He is a rabbi, and he apparently a Trump supporter. Let's watch.
Freedom, the right to assemble, and the right to self-defense. Only in America have these God-given rights so flourished and been categorized as belonging to the people, embodying the very essence of our government. Father, we pray that this outlook and mindset, this form of government continues, as has been our history, especially now when, to our horror, it is being challenged. And so we pray that God gives strength and health to our president, who has splendidly demonstrated daily his determination to defend and maintain the God-given rights of our citizens, as enshrined in our Constitution and in our Declaration, eloquently passed down through our Judeo-Christian tradition. President Trump has stood up fearlessly.
Well, he said Judeo-Christian. You didn't want that picture of charisma to keep talking? I was riveted.
I immediately regret cutting away to that speech, and I'm sure I'll regret that throughout the night. But nothing against this gentleman, but I mean, he's talking about rights as 68 protesters in Louisville, Kentucky were arrested last night alone. These are Breonna Taylor protesters because they were supposedly blocking traffic. And so our rights have been violated by this administration over and over and over again. So when I hear someone talk about Trump protecting our rights, I really can't help but do anything more than roll my eyes, because it's just a flat out lie. Anyway, but Emma, you were actually talking about your, just giving your feedback about the RNC so far. You watched the first night like I did, and I wanted you to finish your point.
Well, really, it's a Trump fest. So they've leaned in really hard into galvanizing the base around Trump. And so that's why it bugs me when we talk about these never Trump Republicans coming over. Much of the base has really bought in, almost all of the base, and it's pretty uniform and similar to other presidencies. So much of the DNC was built around catering to Republicans, and they had Colin Powell, they had John Kasich, whatever. I read these things, I can never pronounce them, doesn't matter. But that's what so much of the DNC was designed to do, and it's a fool's errand, because really totally Republicans have bought in.
Yeah, I think that you make a great point. Here's Governor Kristi Noem right out of Central Casting. Let's take a listen to what she has to say.
Equality, freedom, and opportunity. But today, our founding principles are under attack. This year, the choice for Americans is between a man who values these ideals and all that can be built because of them, and a man who isn't guided by these ideals, and coincidentally, has built nothing. Remember, America's battle for independence and fight for self-governance was something that had never been done before. Men of great intellect and wisdom, like James Madison, the father of our Constitution, hoped our constitutional republic would last for ages, mitigate the problems that would naturally arise from political factions, and prevent tyranny. Madison also authored much of the Bill of Rights because he understood the natural tendency of government to increasingly encroach on the people's consent, and thus our freedom. He urged his colleagues to adopt these amendments to enshrine in our Constitution the ideals laid out in the Declaration of Independence, that all power comes from the people, that the government is created and ought to be exercised for the benefit of the people. Our Constitution guarantees the right to speak, to assemble, and to worship, the right to arm ourselves as a counterbalance to a standing army, and the right to a fair and equitable criminal justice system. We must fight to protect these foundational rights from government interference and indifference. America is unique in the world. Government's power at all levels is limited to the confines of our Constitution, which protects our God-given liberties and civil rights. We are not and will not be the subjects of an elite class of so-called experts. We, the people, are the government. Now, at times, our country has struggled to live up to our founding principles. Another great American, Abraham Lincoln, knew that struggle better than anybody. When he was just 28 years old, Honest Abe saw wild and furious passions worse than savage mops, he said, taking the place of reasoned judgment. He was alarmed by the increasing disregard for the rule of law throughout the country. He was concerned for the people that had seen their property destroyed, their families attacked, and their lives threatened or even taken away. These good people were becoming tired of and disgusted with a government that offered them no protection. Sound familiar? It took 244 years to build this great nation, flaws and all. But we stand to lose it in a tiny fraction of that time if we continue down the path taken by the Democrats and their radical supporters. From Seattle and Portland to Washington and New York, Democrat-run cities across this country are being overrun by violent mobs. The violence is rampant. There's looting, chaos, destruction, and murder. People that can afford to flee have fled, but the people that can't, good, hardworking Americans, are left to fend for themselves. The Republican Party's commitment to individual rights and self-government is as necessary today as it was in 1860 when we won our first presidential election. Our party respects individuals based on who they are. We don't divide people based on their beliefs or their roots. We don't shun people who think for themselves. We respect everyone equally under the Constitution, and we treat them as Martin Luther King Jr. wished, according to the content of their character, not the color of their skin. In just 4 years, President Trump has lifted people of all races and backgrounds out of poverty. He shrunk government. He put money back into the pockets of hardworking, ordinary Americans. He has advanced religious liberty. He protected the Second Amendment. You can look back 50 years. You won't find anyone that has surpassed President Trump's success on these 4 issues alone. History chooses its heroes for the time in which they live. At our founding, Madison was one of the chosen. When the nation's very existence was challenged, it was Lincoln's turn. Thanks to these men, America is a land of hope. Their examples have been repeated in countless ways by simple Americans following their conscience.
So I feel like there are enough. She is. It's amazing how many just flat out lies they can cram into one speech. And honestly, like, it's difficult to cover this in a responsible way because on one hand, we want to be able to show you what they're saying, but on the other hand, I think that it's just wrong to let them go on this like rambling speech without doing the fact checking that's necessary. And so Steve Doocy can go ahead and whine about what we're doing right now, but we're going to fact check. I'm going to start off with a few things, Emma, and then I want to get your thoughts. Who is that guy? Oh, okay. Associated Contract Loggers and Truckers. Okay, we can pause on that guy. It's all right. Nice hat, logging. Okay, so by the way, logging is admirable, and I'm not just making that up. Like, I'm not being sarcastic. Super hot. But anyway, let me just move on to Kristi Noem's lies. You know, it's amazing because on one hand, you'll hear people like Kristi Noem fearmonger about large government. But at the same time, it's Donald Trump who used federal agents to rain terror on people practicing their First Amendment rights in protesting police brutality. That is big government. That is the type of tyranny that should be called out, that should be condemned, but it's the type of big government tyranny that people like Kristi Noem and Donald Trump, of course, are very much in favor of. She says that America is unique to the world, and that might be the only true statement in that speech that we just heard, because America is unique. We're uniquely ill-prepared to deal with a pandemic because of our privatized healthcare model. We are unique in pretending as though we're the best country in the world, when in reality, in study after study, we fall behind and rank well below various developed countries when it comes to everything from education to quality of life to happiness to, even at this point, life expectancy. Our life expectancy has been decreasing recently because of how poorly Americans are treated by this system. And it's been so bad that so many people have resorted to opioids or other types of self-medication because of the devastation that they're dealing with on a daily basis. Nearly 50% of Americans before the pandemic couldn't even afford a $400 emergency. So yeah, I guess when you think of all of these wealthy, developed countries, America's certainly unique. There's no question about that. Yeah. All right. We should go to Marsha Blackburn. Definitely. I'm sorry. Let's do that, and when we come back, we'll talk to you, Emma.
Store in the pew with us at church. They're the regular Americans who step up to volunteer and serve when we need them most. They've stood at the forefront throughout this pandemic. The emergency room nurses who go back shift after shift. The medical researchers developing a vaccine and therapies to combat what the Chinese Communist regime unleashed on the world. Cookeville's Double Springs Church of Christ members lifting our country up in prayer and providing for those impacted by tragedy. But tonight, I want to talk to you about another kind of hero, The kind Democrats don't recognize because they don't fit into their narrative. I'm talking about the heroes of our law enforcement and armed services. Leftists try to turn them into villains. They want to cancel them. But I'm here to tell you, these heroes can't be canceled. Tennessee is full of them. After all, we're the volunteer state. My dad served in the Army in World War II. When he came home, he put on another uniform and for 30 years volunteered to help our underfunded Sheriff's Department. I'm reminded of him whenever I see compassion and selflessness in others. When I see law enforcement officers put their lives on the line every single day to keep our communities safe, in spite of the hatred thrown at them. When I see the heroes who volunteer to serve our country, putting their lives on the line for our freedom. Many of these heroes call Tennessee home, and we could not be more proud of the brave men and women of the 101st Airborne Division at Fort Campbell. The common thread between them is a deep-seated desire to serve a cause larger than themselves. They don't believe their country owes them anything. They believe they owe their country and their fellow man. As hard as Democrats try, they can't cancel our heroes. They can't contest their bravery, and they can't dismiss the powerful sense of service that lives deep in their souls. So, they try to defund them, our military, our police, even ICE, to take away their tools to keep us safe. Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and their radical allies try to destroy these heroes because if there are no heroes to inspire us, government can control us. They close our churches, but keep the liquor stores and abortion clinics open. They say we can't gather in community groups, but encourage protest, riots, and looting in the streets. If the Democrats had their way, they would keep you locked in your house until you become dependent on the government for everything. That sounds a lot like communist China to me. Maybe that's why Joe Biden is so soft on them. Why Nancy Pelosi says that China would prefer Joe Biden. Yep, I bet they would. But President Trump has stood up for our heroes every day. He stood by our law enforcement, our military, and the freedoms we hold dear. He's made good on his promise to put America first. And I hope you will stand with me as we send him back for 4 more years with a clear message to the Democrats. You will never cancel our heroes.
Oh, man. Oh, no. We gotta watch this. We gotta watch this.
I promise there will be commentary at some point. Let's go to this guy.
Surgeons so that I could walk, blind and bloodied, to the medevac helicopter and survive. But he didn't. Dave Worson was killed 2 months later. He died a hero to this great country. Here's the truth about America. We are a country of heroes. I believe that. So should you. We are a people with a common set of ideals conceived in liberty. People that has sacrificed time and again for our freedom and the freedom of others. That's something no other country ever, anywhere can claim. Since 9/11, I've seen America's heroes up close. Some of them saved my life. Some of them saved many others' lives. Many of them never made it home. These heroes acted as if the whole struggle depended on them alone, as if any weakness on their part would be a reflection of the whole nation. That's called duty. And America has a long history of it. Our enemies fear us because Americans fight for good, and we know it. It gives us strength. When our heroes are trusted and equipped, then freedom prevails. The defeat of ISIS was the result of America believing in our heroes, our president having their backs and rebuilding our military so we'd have what we needed to finish the mission. The cowering of the Iranian regime and the restoration of the deterrence once lost is the result of America believing in her own might again. But America's heroism isn't relegated to the battlefield. Every single day we see them if you just know where to look. It's the nurse who volunteers for back-to-back shifts caring for COVID patients because she feels that's her duty. It's the parent who will relearn algebra because there's no way they're letting their kid fall behind while schools are closed. And it's the cop that gets spit on one day and will save a child's life the next. America is the country where the young military wife with 2 young children answers the unexpected knock at the door, looks the man in uniform in the eye, and even as her whole world comes crashing down, she stands up straight, she holds back tears, and takes care of her family, because she must. This is what heroism looks like. It's who we are, nation of heroes. We need you now more than ever. We need to remind ourselves what heroism really is. Heroism is self-sacrifice. It's not moralizing and lecturing over others when they disagree. Heroism is grace, not perpetual outrage. Heroism is rebuilding our communities, not destroying them. Heroism is renewing faith in the symbols that unite us, not tearing them down. You see, America is a fabric. It's woven from the threads of history's best stories, best attributes, and greatest ideas. The American spirit reflects the oldest and most important virtues: self-sacrifice, courage, tolerance, love of country, grace, and passion for human achievement. We can decide right now that American greatness will not be rejected nor squandered. As the American founding was grounded in individual liberty, so will be our future. But if we are to rediscover our strength, then it must be an endeavor undertaken by each and every one of us. We must become the heroes that we so admire. America was built by them, and our future will be protected by them. It will be protected by you. So God bless America.
Good evening. I'm retired Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg. In 1967, at the age of 22,
Wow, there is much to comment on. But I will say, look, let me just mention that I think that while we can definitely sniff out the nonsense, the lies, I really do think that this type of messaging resonates with Americans. I think Americans want to feel proud of their country. They do not want to hear all sorts of criticisms and negativity about the United States. And so while Dan Crenshaw's speech in particular was just full of all sorts of propaganda, the same type of propaganda that convinces disadvantaged youth to join the military and fight in endless wars, which, by the way, they then get forgotten about. We know that that's propaganda. We know it's nonsense. We know what the reality is for our troops. We know what the reality is for our veterans. But that kind of messaging, unfortunately, does resonate with a significant portion of the country, because who doesn't want to be told that we're great? Who doesn't want to be told that we're heroic? Who doesn't want to be told that we're unique and better than any other country in the world? And so I worry, because I think that the propaganda and the messaging during the RNC is a little more powerful than what we heard at the DNC.
Definitely. Fortunately, most people don't make voting decisions based on conventions, but I do feel a shift in what the country's feeling right now. I think Trump has surged a little bit, and some of the polling data has indicated that. That doesn't mean too much because Biden's lead is so sizable, but it's hard because the raw data that I'm seeing backs up Biden winning this very easily. But my instincts are screaming that they're not making the right case, the Democrats. And so I'm pretty torn because while I don't think Blackburn's speech was good, I don't think Crenshaw's speech was good. I mean, Marsha Blackburn tried to claim that, I just wrote it down, that Democrats are trying to cancel our troops. You're canceled, military. You heard it here first on TYT. Hashtag canceled.
No, I got to jump in with one quick fact.
Yeah.
Donald Trump just tried to cut $2 billion from the military budget, not for weapons, not for nonsense, private military contractor giveaways and goodies, but he wanted to cut $2 billion in healthcare for the military. That includes active duty troops and our veterans.
Republicans tried to do that for years. When Bernie Sanders was on heading the Veterans Affairs Committee, he fought tooth and nail with John McCain about these cuts. So it's just ridiculous that they have the kind of authority to speak on this and pretend they care about their veterans. It's really this warped kind of national mentality that we have when talking about soldiers and veterans. Sending you to needless wars isn't caring about you. That's just continuing to bolster up the institution which chewed you up and spat you out. What actually means caring about veterans is providing them with health care and resources when they come back mentally and physically harmed. So yes, it's just frustrating on many fronts. But all you have to do is back it up with patriotism and blind fealty to the country, and then people feel warm and fuzzy, and then it's the appearance. That's what has bothered me so much about the Trump era. So much is about the appearance of things and not the substance of things. Trump can appear to do an executive order with an eviction moratorium or lowering pharma prices, and for him, that achieves the goal. He doesn't actually have to help people's lives.
Right, we talked about that on the main show yesterday, about how he signed those executive orders to lower drug prices and then literally did not follow through on them. And so one of the executive orders was meant to ensure that Americans pay the same price for prescription drugs as European countries do or as Canada does. But after signing the executive order, he just kind of dropped it. He didn't really do anything about it. And you're right. I mean, this is what you get with a reality show host who ends up becoming president. Everything is fake. Everything is surface level. And I don't know what the right strategy is at this point to combat it, because you can yell from the rooftops all you want about what's really going on in regard to substance, but it's just not getting through to his ardent supporters, even as they're still paying the same amount of money for prescription drugs, even as tens of millions of Americans are jobless right now, even as 177,000 Americans have died in the middle of this pandemic thanks to Trump's incompetence. It just does not resonate with them, and I don't know what the answer is at this point.
Yeah, I had this conversation with a good friend of mine, Nash. I've had him on Rebel. He was a reporter for Time, but has left and is now out as a radical lefty. He'll admit that. He's convinced that Trump is going to win, and he lives in North Carolina. He sees the entire logging industry, that he knows a lot of people that work there that's completely backing Trump, and he's convinced that the polling data in terms of research is really behind and completely scattershot. And so that's kind of changed my mind as well. Strategy,
I am worried about that.
Yeah, and I said, well, how about the material conditions on the ground? And he goes, well, look, I think there's so much dishonesty in politics and it's so convoluted that and both parties. This is the danger of when you have a Democratic Party that doesn't represent people and isn't populist, because then it muddies the waters and people think politics doesn't matter, and it doesn't. So they make their decisions based on emotion and fealty to one person or one ideology or one team, and you can then market yourself in a specific way, and the Democrats can't market themselves. So
that's such a good point.
Yeah,
it really is. Yeah. I think the Biden campaign is making such a giant mistake by aligning itself with Bush-era Republicans as opposed to progressives who clearly have policy proposals that resonate with the majority of Americans. On single-payer healthcare alone, 69% of Americans, and that includes Republicans, this is a nationally representative sample, favor single-payer healthcare. And so if Biden had more of a populist message and was genuine about it, I think he would win in a landslide. But he's gonna go ahead and align himself with people who have helped him and aided him materially in this particular election. And honestly, while we might love the harshness of the Lincoln Project ads, it's a double-edged sword, right? Because there are consequences to that, and Biden has an obligation to them. And I think that it's clear in the way that he's campaigned. I think that on the surface, there's been a lot of pretend, not even like pandering, like pretend pandering toward progressives with like the task force, the progressive task force and all of that. But when you look at what he's proposing and the fact that he's still willing to say that he would veto a bipartisan single payer bill, no, I mean, he's aligning himself with Bill Kristol. And that is so incredibly devastating and depressing and really does jeopardize the future of this country. It jeopardizes the outcome of this election.
Yeah, I mean, I think so much of what you said is incredibly true. I think part of it too is Biden's inability to be charismatic and dynamic. I mean, I saw this point made on Twitter talking about how Biden, Bill Clinton and Obama were such dynamic speakers and marketers of themselves. Hillary Clinton was not that, but she was better than Biden, and she lost. And Biden can't talk, like, let's be real. I watched that interview with Kamala Harris on ABC News, and I'm even more depressed about the pick than I thought I would be. She's so fake. She's so fake. I mean, it sticks out to me even more than in the primary. I know we're going a little off the rails here, but it just blew my mind how she fake laughs. She's disingenuous with her answers. Anyone watching that goes, I don't like that. That's a politician. I don't like that. And so now I think even more that pick could really be. I can't believe I'm saying this based on polling data from the past few months. When Biden was the nominee, I was certain he'd lose to Trump. Then the pandemic hit, and then I was certain that Trump would lose. And now I don't know. I really, watching these conventions, it's so clear which one has a message and which one is doing the same thing, even a weaker T version of I'm not Trump than was done in 2016. Because Hillary at least tried to market herself as a feminist and she had some policy proposals. I mean, I do like some of the climate things and Build Back Better, whatever, they're okay. But what is he?
Yeah. You mentioned how she marketed herself as a feminist. I'm gonna say something that I don't know, might be controversial, but I really do think it's true. Feminism, unfortunately, is a dirty word. And it's a dirty word on the right for sure, there's no question. But I think even among Democratic voters, they have this unfortunate knee-jerk reaction thanks to the negative connotation to that word. And so when she was marketing herself as a feminist, Hillary Clinton, I was like, this is a very odd marketing scheme because this doesn't seem like something that will resonate with the majority of people, especially, considering the economic situation a lot of Americans are finding themselves in right now. And so, oh geez, okay, let's go to Kayleigh McEnany. We'll finish the thought later.
I'm here to share with you how he supported me, both as a new mom and as an American with a pre-existing condition. When I was 21 years old, I got a call that changed my life. It was my doctor informing me that I had tested positive for the BRCA2 genetic mutation, a mutation that put my chances of breast cancer at 84%. It was the same mutation that my mom had, compelling her to get a preventative double mastectomy, removing her breast tissue, but protecting her from a disease that has taken far too many of our mothers, our sisters, our friends. In my family, 8 women alone were diagnosed with breast cancer, several in their young 20s. I now faced the same prospect. For nearly a decade, I was routinely at Moffitt Cancer Center, getting MRIs, ultrasounds, and necessary surveillance. During these visits, I crossed paths with brave women battling cancer and fighting through chemotherapy. They were a testament to American strength. They are American heroes. On May 1st, 2018, I followed in my mother's footsteps, choosing to get a preventative mastectomy. I was scared. The night before, I fought back tears as I prepared to lose a piece of myself forever. But the next day, with my mom, dad, husband, and Jesus Christ by my side, I underwent a mastectomy, almost eliminating my chance of breast cancer, a decision I now celebrate. Breast reconstruction has advanced remarkably. While it is an individual's decision, my doctor and I chose a course of surgery that left me virtually unchanged. But more important than physical results, I developed a strength and a confidence that I carry with me. During one of my most difficult times, I expected to have the support of my family, but I had more support than I knew. As I came out of anesthesia, one of the first calls I received was from Ivanka Trump. As I recovered, my phone rang again. It was President Trump calling to check on me. I was blown away. Here was the leader of the free world caring about my circumstance. At the time, I had only met President Trump on a few occasions. But now I know him well, and I can tell you that this president stands by Americans with pre-existing conditions. In fact, President Trump called me this morning. I spoke with him several times today, and he told me how proud he was of me for sharing this story. The same way President Trump has supported me, he supports you. I see it every day. I've heard him say the hardest part of his job is writing to loved ones of fallen soldiers. I've seen him offer heartfelt outreach to grieving parents who lost their children to crime in the streets. And I've watched him fight for Americans who lost their jobs. President Trump fights for the American people because he cares about stories like these. I have a 9-month-old daughter. She's a beautiful, sweet little girl. And I choose to work for this president for her. When I look into my baby's eyes, I see a new life, a miracle for which I have a solemn responsibility to protect. That means protecting America's future, a future President Trump will fight for, where our neighborhoods are protected, where life is sacred, where God is cherished, not taken out of our schools, removed from our pledge, and erased from our history. I want my daughter to grow up in President Donald J. Trump's America. Choosing to have a preventative mastectomy was the hardest decision I ever had to make. But supporting President Trump, who will protect my daughter and our children's future, was the easiest.
Okay, great. Hopefully they don't have another big name speaker next, because I want to keep talking. Who is that? I don't recognize that person. Okay.
She looks like she's going off to sea. Sailor outfit. Okay, never mind. I'm sorry.
As much as I hate saying this, I think Kayleigh McEnany's speech was good. That may have abandoned him for obvious reasons: cruelty at the border, ripping children away from their parents, what's happened with the pandemic, the civil unrest. But I have to say, even though I know exactly what they're doing, I personally know someone who had to go through a double mastectomy when she was 30 years old. And when, hearing Kayleigh McEnany talk about it humanizes her. And it resonates. And again, there was a lot of this with Biden's convention. So I don't want to take that away from the Democrats, because I think that's the one thing they did very well. They humanized, and there was a lot of talk about empathy and kindness. And I think that's important. But this RNC, again, just to reiterate, really does have me concerned, because Republicans are great at messaging. They are. And they have no problem spreading a populist message with absolutely no intention of actually following through and doing the right thing once they have power.
Right. I mean, the thing about the RNC is that the Republicans are working with an incumbency advantage. So they don't necessarily need to make their case in the same way that needs to be done on the Democratic side, which is why I would agree with Anna that the RNC is concerning to me, in that the way that they're providing a clear picture of America in their vision, it's clearer than what the Democrats provided, which should be the opposite if you're challenging an incumbent. And a lot of people by now know who Kayleigh McEnany is, and this provided a whole new side to her that you may not already know. So you kind of already know what she stands for, so you don't necessarily need to hear what her connection is in terms of her female experience to what Trump would be providing for the country, even though as political nerds, I'm like, I feel for you. This sounds extremely traumatic and horrible. What does this have to do with Donald Trump, his vision for America? He wants to decimate the Affordable Care Act, has done so. Biden would not do so. So other women who have breast cancer would be better off under Biden. Okay, but when you're just talking about suburban moms in the middle of the country who are like, I know her, and they would just watch that and go, wow, that's a really powerful story. And that's really all you need, is just that kernel to just stick in your head. And that did its job.
I totally agree with you. Absolutely. I want to thank our new members. During the main show today, someone asked, like, I don't know how you do it. How do you do the main show and then have to cover the RNC afterwards? It's because we have an obligation, or as Dan Crenshaw says, a duty to our members, to our viewers, to give you guys uncensored, unfiltered commentary and analysis, because it's rare to see, honestly, in mainstream media especially. So I want to name our new members by name. Thomas Bell, thank you so much. Michelle Hansen, Prince Aban, Jane, You Can't Make Me, I like that name. Van L, Matia 98, Emily Goodwin. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much for supporting the show. When you become a member, you not only get exclusive content and all these goodies that come along with membership, you help to make this whole network happen. So we're able to do a show like this. We're able to do the main show. John's able to do the damage report. Emma's able to do Rebel Headquarters, which is an excellent YouTube channel. You guys should check that out as well. Esther Siegler, Danielle Esposito, Marcy D. You guys are amazing. Thank you again. And I do want to read a few super chat comments as well. By the way, if you're watching live and you're wondering, okay, how can I help out? How can I become a member? You can go to tyt.com/join, or if you're watching on YouTube, you can join as a YouTube member as well. Super chat comments. Jenna says, Anna plus Emma plus weed. We'll get through this together. You're right. Although I'm not indulging in the devil's lettuce yet. Nishi says, war cry, which is probably a reference to Dan Crenshaw's speech, which we'll talk about in more detail later. Luminia says, love you, Anna and Emma. Keep up the good work. And April Salty Snark Scam says, you two gals keep me sane. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you guys. Thank you for watching. All right, with that said, since we have a little bit of time, let's talk a little more about Dan Crenshaw. Emma, what did you think about his speech?
I thought that was extremely boring, but I mean, I think Kayleigh McEnany wins best speech of the night thus far because of what we talked about earlier. But Crenshaw, God, just routine patriotism. He didn't really connect it even to Donald Trump that well, especially when we're not in a time of war. Although, yes, this is the United States. We're in a time of perpetual war. My favorite moment from the first night of the convention was when Trump Jr. talked about how Donald Trump was going to end the endless wars, when it's insane and hilarious to claim that, because he's like trying to be Tucker Carlson. He has a poster of Tucker Carlson hanging above his bed. And so he thinks he's some sort of paleo. Okay, we gotta go, right, Kayleigh? All right. Or Kellyanne Conway, yeah.
Let's watch.
Never mind.
But also a reminder that our democracy is young and fragile. A woman in a leadership role can still seem novel. Not so for President Trump. For decades, he has elevated women to senior positions in business and in government. He confides in and consults us, respects our opinions, and insists that we are on equal footing with the men. President Trump helped me shatter a barrier in the world of politics by empowering me to manage his campaign to its successful conclusion. With the help of millions of Americans, our team defied the critics, the naysayers, the conventional wisdom, and we won. For many of us, women's empowerment is not a slogan. It comes not from strangers on social media or sanitized language in a corporate handbook. It comes from the everyday heroes who nurture us, who shape us, and who believe in us. I was raised in a household of all women. They were self-reliant and resilient. Their lives were not easy, but they never complained. Money was tight, but we had an abundance of what mattered most: family, faith, and freedom. I learned that in America, limited means does not make for limited dreams. The promise of America belongs to us all. This is a land of inventors and innovators, of entrepreneurs and educators, of pioneers and parents, each contributing to the success and the future of a great nation and her people. These everyday heroes have a champion in President Trump. The teacher who took extra time to help students adjust to months of virtual learning. The nurse who finished a 12-hour COVID shift and then took a brief break only to change her mask, gown, and gloves to do it all over again. The small business owner striving to reopen after the lockdown was lifted, and then again after her store was vandalized and looted. The single mom with 2 kids, 2 jobs, 2 commutes, who 10 years after that empty promise finally has health insurance. President Trump and Vice President Pence have lifted Americans, provided them with dignity, opportunity, and results. I have seen firsthand many times the president comforting and encouraging a child who has lost a parent who has lost a child, a worker who lost his job, an adolescent who lost her way to drugs. Don't lose hope, he has told them, assuring them that they are not alone and that they matter. There always will be people who have far more than us. Our responsibility is to focus on those who have far less than us. President Trump has done precisely that in taking unprecedented action to combat this nation's drug crisis. He told me, "This is so important, Kellyanne. So many lives have been ruined by addiction and will never even know it because people are ashamed to reach out for help and they're not even sure who to turn to in their toughest hour." Rather than look the other way, President Trump stared directly at this drug crisis next door, and through landmark bipartisan legislation has helped secure historic investments in surveillance, interdiction, education, prevention, treatment, and recovery. We have a long way to go, but the political inertia that costs lives and the silence and the stigma that prevents people in need from coming forward is melting away. This is the man I know and the president we need for 4 more years. He picks the toughest fights and tackles the most complex problems. He has stood by me, and he will stand up for you. In honor of the women who empowered me and for the future of the children we all cherish, thank you, and God bless you always.
Okay. So that speech was so incredibly Orwellian. I mean, as she's speaking, I'm hearing War's
We have a second religious leader. Okay, I'm sorry.
Freedom is slavery and ignorance is strength. Like, I mean, she's talking about the nurses fighting COVID, but of course, failing to mention that those nurses were ill-equipped to fight COVID because we did not have enough masks. We didn't have enough PPE. In fact, PPE early on in the pandemic was shipped off to China, was shipped off to other countries by the Trump administration. But I mean, who cares? Those pesky little facts.
Also, the attempts to claim that Trump provided and gave health insurance to new people under this administration. I mean, it was hard for me to kind of see, but it's the exact opposite. Millions have lost insurance under Donald Trump because of the way that he's chipped away at the ACA. So Kellyanne and Kayleigh McEnany, their job tonight was to appeal to female voters. Kayleigh McEnany was good at that. Kellyanne Conway looks like she's had a rough few weeks, and we know she's had a rough few weeks. Yep. She was robotic. It didn't make much sense. And guys, you can like say that Trump helped you in your careers, that's fine, and supports women, make that case. But let's stop trying to make the case that he's empathetic and empathic and understanding of other people's pain. That's not why he was elected. So it's so polling driven and annoying. He was elected because people thought he was going to run the country like a business, and because he was racist and because he was anti-establishment. That's really what it was. It wasn't because he understood people's pain. They clearly have some polling data that shows that he needs to up his numbers in that area, but don't waste your time. That's the antithetical to Trump, and even his most hardcore supporters know that and like that about him. So come on, guys.
Yeah, Chazpa from our member comments asks, why do I feel so gaslighted? Yeah, I mean, because we all are. I mean, we're experiencing just this, everything is regressing, everything is devolving, and we're being told during this convention that everything is great, that we're the best country in the world. And but again, I know I'm sounding incredibly repetitive and I don't mean to, but I just know through people in my life who unfortunately buy into conservative rhetoric, they love hearing about how great we are as a country. They love feeling the pride of being Americans. And in their minds, anyone who's critical about any part of this country is an enemy, is just anti-American, and oblivious to how wonderful and great this country is, even as they're struggling themselves. Like, these are people, and I know this is anecdotal, but I think it is representative of Trump supporters. Even as they're dealing with a horrible economic situation, even as they're having to juggle their jobs from home in the middle of this pandemic, while also trying to educate their kids, right? They're complaining about it incessantly, but at the same time, they're not connecting the dots. They don't see how the inaction and the lack of competence from the Trump administration has needlessly extended the pain and suffering and deaths, by the way, during this pandemic. And it's because people want to feel good. I mean, I think Americans are conditioned to want to or they're conditioned to respond well to the platitudes and like the grandiosity of like American exceptionalism.
Definitely.
But it's really nonsense. It's nonsense. You know, if I was like emperor of the world, like these are the kinds of fantasies I have because I'm a weirdo, I would force the federal government to pay for study abroad, not for college students, although sure, let's pay for college students too. But in high school, you have to take a full year studying abroad, any country you want. Because I think travel opens your eyes. I remember in 2007, the first time I traveled out of the country, I was like, oh, but like these Europeans, it's like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Like, what are they doing? They're having coffee in a cafe. Like, why aren't they working? You know what I'm saying? And it's like, when I went to Barcelona, I was like, wait, they're shutting down all their businesses at 5 o'clock for like a siesta, and then they'll open up shop later. That's amazing.
It's amazing.
It's a different, people enjoy their lives. And look, I'm not trying to pretend as if like all the countries I'm mentioning are perfect. Of course not. But there is this emphasis on family, on actually enjoying the fruits of your labor. And there is a robust safety net where you're not worried about literally losing everything you have due to going bankrupt from medical debt. I want to live that life. Like I want to breathe easy. I want to enjoy my family, you know?
Yeah, of course. I mean, we came so close with Bernie Sanders, and it's painful every single day. It is painful every single day to think about what could have been. And I fear that this is the end of the republic. I think not having a leftist opposition, I thought, you know, I spoke not hyperbolically. I really believe this. If Bloomberg were the nominee, it's the end of the republic, because that means a full right winger has taken over the only left wing opposition party. But it's not too far with Biden. And now I don't even know if he'll win. So I hate to be super doom and gloom about it, because usually I try to, you know, be a little more optimistic to counter Anna's salt. But no, I know exactly what you mean. And
yeah, and like, look, it's the facts are the facts, and I know that this is one poll, and you guys can go ahead and do what you will with this one poll, but I think it's concerning. So CNBC did a poll to see how Americans feel about coronavirus in swing states. They focused on swing states. And what worried me the most is if you look at the numbers in swing states broken down between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, Biden is still leading in swing states, but the margin is razor thin. It really is. It's within the margin of error. And so that's not a good sign. Donald Trump's approval rating has actually increased in recent weeks.
Just because he's talking about COVID, that's all he needs to do. He pretended it didn't exist, and now he's talking about it. And really, when he was doing those press conferences, even though he was bungling it at the beginning of the pandemic, he was still above water. So he really doesn't need to do much, because Biden is just not making his case and staying in his basement.
Yeah, he's using the same strategy that Hillary Clinton did. He really is. It's amazing how we're repeating the exact same mistakes from 2016. You've got to do more than just assume that Trump is going to self-destruct. Because when you're kind of sitting back, you're allowing Trump to run with whatever narrative he wants. And whatever, I mean, people can say whatever they want about Trump. And believe me, I totally agree that he's not the smartest guy in the world, but he gets marketing. He definitely understands marketing. That's the only thing he's really good at. And messaging within the Republican Party has always been stronger than the Democratic Party. And we're experiencing that right now when you really juxtapose the two conventions.
Absolutely. And I meant to say this earlier when you were talking about people in your life who are on the right and maybe just don't consume news in the same way that we do. I have a very similar experience. I think people have a really hard time connecting coronavirus to Trump. And the fact that some people, not everybody, But some people who are kind of apolitical and maybe aren't paying attention to other countries and their numbers and proportionally what the United States is doing, the fact that we're 4% of the world population and 20% of COVID deaths, which is still the most astounding statistic to me. I mean, people are like, well, I've heard this over and over. What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? What is Trump gonna do? Well, obviously we know that he could have done a lot of things differently, but there's this kind of political malaise where neither party represents, so nothing can be connected to how I'm feeling. People do not connect politics in this individualistic society, in this American exceptionalistic society, to how they're feeling and their financial and emotional well-being on a daily basis when it's entirely connected. And that's part of this American exceptionalism that's broken our brains. And it's part of the media too. And so yeah, again, it's like, I talked to these people in my life. Well, what was he gonna do? What was he gonna do? It's coronavirus. Everything's bad. There's no understanding of how things could have been better. And then I'm in New York, so it's like, well, what about Cuomo and the nursing homes, huh? I'm like, okay, well, I'm not defending that either, but yeah.
But that's the incredible thing. Like yesterday, when that story emerged, the video that went viral of some protesters, we talked about it yesterday on the main show, some protesters, randomly targeting this woman as she's like having a meal and drinking a cocktail at a DC hotel outside. There were some people on the right who were like, oh, thank you for having some integrity to call this out. And it's like, but we call out things on, like in the Democratic Party especially, that we think are not helpful, that we disagree with, that we're very critical of. And I don't know, like Republicans, they're always in line. Like Republicans are always on message. If they ever attack each other, it's rare, but they usually do things, I think, behind the scenes. They don't let their conflicts go too public. They don't air their grievances against one another too often, which is why anytime Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump are going at it, like there's some sort of disagreement, we'll cover it, and that story blows up because it seems it's so rare. It's like a big event. With Democrats, though, I feel like we are critical of each other all the time, and I think with us at TYT, we want to be fair, and we're critical of things based on substance, not nonsense. But we never get credit for it, and I don't know. I don't know what the right strategy is, because I think it is right to have integrity. I think it is right to call out things that we think are counterproductive. But at the same time, we are dealing with a political party that's always in line, always strong on messaging. And I don't know what the answer is, because I don't feel represented by the Democratic Party. I don't feel like I belong with the Biden campaign. Biden, there's nothing there for me other than Trump is awful and I want him out.
Let me just make one point about what you said, because I think it's just really important. For me, the reason that right-wing populism, which is largely a myth, but there are some whatever elements of it, or the factions within the Republican Party, like the Tea Party, they can get embraced by the mainstream party and become one and unite, is because they're all not going to mess with corporate power. None of them are.
Yeah,
none of them.
Such a good point.
None of them.
Such a good point.
Right. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
But the left, the insurgent populist left, as opposed to whatever is the right populism, they're
okay.
We can go to that. But they will do that.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Young Turks. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur, and I'll see you soon.